If you've spent the last few evenings scrolling through endless lists of telescopes, trying to figure out which one actually gives you night ski value without turning your balcony into a storage unit, this review is here to cut through the noise. I've been looking at Dobsonians, GOTO mounts, and those pricey carbon fiber tubes that promise portable performance, and I still wasn't sure which option would actually fit into a realistic weekend observing routine. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Skywatcher Flextube 16-inch 400P Synscan GOTO Collapsible Dobsonian lands in that sweet spot between a backyard-sized aperture and a travel-friendly footprint. At first glance, the 16-inch primary mirror sounds like a serious step up from the 8 or 10-inch models you see on most entry-level shelves. But the real question is whether the extra glass translates into nighttime payoff for someone who can only set up a few times a month. That's what I'm breaking down today. Let's start with the basic premise of a Dobsonian, a simple altazimuth base that lets you point the scope by hand, combined with a large Newtonian mirror. The Flextube keeps that philosophy but adds a motorized Synscan GOTO system and a collapsible tube that folds down to about a third of its observing length. For a user who wants to wander into a dark site, set up, and then let the computer find the objects, it sounds ideal. The trade-off is that you're now adding electronics to a design that's famously low maintenance. If you've never dealt with a GOTO hand controller, that could be a learning curve worth considering. Who should actually buy this? If you already own a 6 or 8-inch Dobsonian and find yourself hitting the "I wish I could see more detail on the planet's" wall, the jump to a 16-inch aperture will give you noticeably sharper crescents on Saturn and finer banding on Jupiter. The larger mirror also gathers more light, turning faint deep sky objects like the Andromeda Galaxy's outer halo into visible smudges that a smaller scope would miss. The collapsible tube makes it possible to transport that light-gathering power in a standard SUV, which is a big win for club meet outings or occasional trips to a local dark sky park. On the other side, skip this if you're a city dweller with only a balcony and a limited budget. The whole package, even with the affordable label, still runs close to the high three-figure range, and you'll need a sturdy, level ground surface to get the Dobsonian base to track smoothly. Trying to set it up on a cramped balcony or on a wobbly table will quickly erode the easy fuse that makes Dobsonians popular. Also, if you're looking for a pure grab-and-go experience, the Synscan controller adds steps. You must power it, align the system, and sometimes troubleshoot firmware quirks that pop up after a firmware update. That's not a deal breaker, but it's a hidden cost in time. Now let's talk practicality. The first thing you notice when the tube is unfolded is the Crayford Style Focuser. Unlike the older rack and pinion designs, Crayford focuses are smoother and give you finer control when you're zeroing in on planetary detail. In real use, I found that a slow, steady turn lets you reach perfect focus on Saturn's rings in under a minute, even after a cold night when the optics are contracting. The focuser also holds its position well, so you won't be fighting drift during a long lunar session. The Synscan GOTO system, however, is where the practical strengths and weaknesses really diverge. When the battery is fresh, the controller locks onto the sky within a few seconds after you input the object's name or coordinates. The database includes thousands of deep sky targets, and the hand controller's backlit screen is readable even under a full moon. The downside shows up when you're trying to observe in colder weather. The electronics can become sluggish, and the motor's torque isn't enough to nudge the massive 16-inch tube quickly across the sky. That means you'll still spend a few minutes manually swinging the scope to a new region before the GOTO kicks in. It's not a failure, just a reminder that the motor is an aid, not a replacement for the classic Dobsonian push-pull feel. Another practical point is the collapsible tube design. The tube splits into 3 sections that lock together with a simple twist lock mechanism. In my experience, the joints are solid enough that the tube doesn't flex during a typical observing session, but they do add a tiny amount of wobble if you're pushing the mount hard to chase an object near the horizon. That's why I recommend using the scope on a stable, level pier or a heavy tripod if you're in a windy spot. The advantage, though, is undeniable. The entire assembly fits into a standard car trunk, and you can unload it in under 5 minutes with 2 people. What about the optics themselves? A 400mm focal length at f/4.4 means the telescope is fast, delivering a relatively wide field of view. This is a boon for large nebulae like the Orion Nebula, where you can see